Hello everyone and welcome to LewisFiction, and welcome to what if DC sold their characters' film rights like Marvel did in the 90s. So in this alternate timeline, we're going to be reversing the roles. Which characters from DC would have been sold if they ended up going bankrupt instead of Marvel like they did in the 90s? Which characters would have been sold, and what would the cinematic landscape look like in the 21st century if we compare what happened with all the different companies and with all the different characters? Before we discuss any of the potential films that would have come out, let's take a look at what characters were sold by Marvel in the 90s to which companies, and which DC characters would comparatively take in their places. The big player and the big overhaul in film rights was of course to Fox, who ended up acquiring the rights to the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, Deadpool, Daredevil and Elektra, to name the main ones. Sony Pictures were the next big hitters, acquiring the rights to Marvel's most popular character, Spider-Man, as well as Ghost Rider. And finally, New Line Cinema got the rights to Blade. Universal would also acquire the distribution rights to make a Hulk solo film, but Marvel and Disney were still allowed to use the Hulk in any capacity that they wanted when it came to Avengers films and crossovers, so there were no rights issues there. So with that established, what are the comparative characters that DC would end up losing? I think the most obvious one is Batman to Sony Pictures, in the same way that Spider-Man is Marvel's most popular character, and in a way Marvel could probably make the most for Spider-Man's sale. I imagine the same would also go for DC, as Batman is DC's most popular character. Now of course you could substitute Batman with Superman, as Superman is almost on the same level as Batman in terms of popularity, but I'm just gonna stick with Batman because I do believe Batman ever so slightly eclipses Superman in terms of DC's most popular character. So Batman would end up in the clutches of Sony Pictures. Booster Gold would also be acquired by Sony as the comparative character for Ghost Rider. When it comes to Fox, however, DC would end up selling the film rights of the Teen Titans, who would be the X-Men comparison, and the Flash family, who would be the comparison for the Fantastic Four. Originally, I was thinking the Terrifics would go to Fox, maybe even the Doom Patrol or the Legion of Superheroes, but they are nowhere near as popular as the Fantastic Four were in comparison. It is almost like a popularity contest. You have to think about it in the sense that the MCU weren't able to use two of their three most popular superhero teams in the X-Men and the Fantastic Four. The only one they had left was the Avengers, so it made it difficult for the MCU in the early days, having to take risks on the likes of Iron Man and Thor, who before their films weren't actually A-list superheroes. Iron Man and Thor were C-list, maybe even D-list heroes at best, whereas at the time before those films, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man were all heroes that would definitely have gotten solo movies if Marvel had the rights. So I had to go for the same sort of vibe when it came to DC. The Doom Patrol, the Legion of Superheroes, they weren't popular enough, so I felt like having to let go of the Teen Titans would be huge for DC, and of course the Flash family and all the surrounding characters like Wally, Jade, Jesse Quick and Reverse Flash had to go as well, because the Flash family and the Teen Titans would definitely be a huge part in building a cinematic universe for DC. Not to mention, Fox would also acquire the film rights to Deathstroke and the Birds of Prey as well. Moving on, DC would also sell the distribution rights of a Superman solo film to Universal, although not the full extensive rights to the character. And of course, finally, the character Vampire would be sold to New Line Cinema. Now with that out of the way, what would the cinematic landscape look like after these rights changes? Firstly, DC's Vampire would get 3 films releasing in 1998, 2002 and 2004 under New Line Cinema, which would actually do quite well considering the popularity of the character in mainstream audiences. Moving on to Fox, starting in 2000, would be a very popular line of Teen Titans films, stretching for many years to come. Nightwing, who would be the most popular character in the film series, would go on to have solo films releasing in 2009, 2013 and 2017, when eventually his character's story would come to an end. The films throughout would see many different variations of the team, with the limited amount of characters they could use, forcing Fox to use lesser known DC characters. Either way, the film series is relatively successful and eventually ends in 2019. Fox during this time would also produce 3 Flash films, one in 2005, which followed the origin story of the Flash family, including the likes of Barry Allen and Wally West. The The film would then follow up with a sequel, which tackled the rise of Gorilla Grodd. However, both of these films would be poorly received, which led to a third film never to be made. They eventually did get to a third film, however, but it would be a reboot of the entire series in 2015, with a brand new film tackling the Flash and surrounding speedsters. But it was left due to it financially flopping, and critically, it was even worse. Fox would also go on to make a film about the Birds of Prey, expanding upon various different characters, and would even go on to make 2 Deathstroke films in 2016 and 2018. Now, for the big one. Sony Pictures realised they have a massive financial success on their hands with the film rights to Batman, and in the late 90s they appoint James Cameron to make a solo Batman flick. However, the script is dark, raunchy, and isn't to Sony's liking, as it doesn't tackle the essence of the character that they want. So they end up bringing on Sam Raimi, who starting in 2002 and ending in 2007, brings us a Batman trilogy which ends up becoming beloved by fans across the globe decades after. A 4th Batman film was in production, however Sony got carried away and had high demands for a plethora of characters to appear that Raimi didn't want. Batman's expanded rogues gallery and character roster gave Sony way too many ideas, which ended up forcing Raimi out of the project. A brand new Batman reboot would launch in 2012, directed by Mark Webb, which would see a more up-to-date take on Batman. They followed up with a sequel in 2014, and even had plans for an extensive cinematic Batman universe to follow on, with many more Batman films, a Joker spin-off, a Catwoman spin-off, and even a film expanding upon the life of Bruce's father, Thomas Wayne. However, Sony got too ahead of themselves and ended up biting off more than they could chew, with the second Batman film in 2014, focusing more on setting up a cinematic universe rather than creating a cohesive story, which led to the demise and the downfall of the second attempt at a Batman franchise. That would be the outcome for all of the sold characters, but just for a bit of fun, if DC ended up trying to make a cinematic universe in the vein of the MCU with the limited characters at their disposal, what would that look like? Well, here is a brief outline of what I believe these 3 phases would have been, without the characters that they eventually sold on. So in phase 1 we have Green Arrow, Superman, Green Arrow 2, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman and the Justice League, obviously mirroring everything that happened in MCU phase 1. Moving on to phase 2 we have Green Arrow 3, Green Lantern 2, Wonder Woman 2, Doom Patrol, which takes the place of Guardians of the Galaxy, Justice League 2 and the Atom. Of course, then coming into phase 3 we have Martian Manhunter, Dr. Fate, Doom Patrol Volume 2, and then of course probably the most interesting change in this cinematic universe is the Batman releasing in 2017, taking the place of Spider-Man Homecoming. Now obviously, since Batman is the comparison for Spider-Man in this alternate timeline after 2014, and the plans for a Batman cinematic universe were scrapped by Sony Pictures, Sony would eventually come to a deal with DC to include Batman in the cinematic universe, and this would be his introduction to the universe. Then of course we go on to Green Lantern 3 in 2017, Aquaman, Justice League 3, The Atom 2, Shazam, Justice League 4, which I imagine they would end up defeating Darkseid, and then the Batman Far From Home. And with that, that is what if DC sold their characters film rights like Marvel did in the 90s. Hopefully you all enjoyed this mini thought experiment. It was a bit of fun. In fact, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and tell me in the comments below other what if scenarios you'd like me to cover, because these are a lot of fun to make, and I really do love talking about these different alternate universes where different rights and situations happened. It's a lot of fun. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take care and peace.